Today, I'm going to tell you a story so forbidden it shattered bloodlines, set in the heart of the Wild West, where dust-choked trails, gunfire echoes, and ancient hatred ruled the land. It was a place where love crossed paths with death, where fate didn't ask for permission, only demanded a price. It all began with a single glance, small, fleeting, and dangerous enough to ignite a war that would chase two souls across mountains, fire, and generations. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The winter of 1875 settled over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains like a living hunter. Quiet, patient, and cruel. Snow poured from a hard gray sky, draping the New Mexico high country in a beauty sharp enough to kill. The peaks clawed upward like broken blades, their pine-covered slopes bowed under ice and frozen weight. Wind screamed through narrow canyons, carrying the smell of locked earth and the unspoken truth that only the toughest would see spring. The Apache had survived in these mountains for more generations than memory allowed. They knew every cut of stone, every hidden seep of water, every narrow trail threading through land that could end a stranger in hours. They traveled this country like ghosts, leaving nothing behind, taking only what was needed, honoring a land that demanded humility. Coda stood at the edge of a granite shelf, his dark eyes sweeping the valley below with the still focus of a hunting hawk. At 28 winters, he was young for a leader, yet no one challenged his command. His father had been a feared war chief. His grandfather before him a legend whose name still stirred respect beside campfires. But among the Apache, leadership was never handed down like a white man's title. It was earned through courage, judgment, and devotion to freedom above all else. The cold burned his skin, but Coda hardly felt it. Since boyhood, he had trained himself to endure far worse than winter's bite. His long black hair, braided with leather and marked by a single eagle feather, fell past his shoulders. Buckskins layered with fur shielded him from cold fierce enough to steal a man's breath. His face was cut from hard lines and open plains, high cheekbones, a strong nose, a jaw built for resolve. But it was his eyes that held men still, dark as obsidian, capable of mercy or wrath without warning. Around him, 15 of his finest fighters waited in silence, breath fogging the air. These were men who had bled beside him, men who trusted him with their lives. They knew this raid was not for pride or conquest. It was survival. Ridge, his closest friend since childhood, and his most loyal warrior, stepped quietly to his side. At 30, Ridge carried a heavy scar from brow to jaw, a gift from a grizzly that had nearly ended him years earlier. Where Coda was lean and fast, Ridge was thick-muscled and relentless. Together they balanced one another in war and counsel. "The herd's moving toward the canyon, just like you said," Ridge murmured, breath rising white in the cold. Coda nodded, never lifting his gaze. The Boone Ranch, one of the largest cattle holdings in the territory, sprawled across land that once fed Apache hunters. Eli Boone was a man who seized what he wanted, convinced that money and influence placed him above law, above decency. For 5 years, his cattle had ruined water sources the Apache depended on. His hired guns had killed 2 of Coda's people, men who had been hunting deer on ancestral ground. Reservation agents offered spoiled flour and rotten meat in exchange for surrender and confinement. Coda had seen what those places did to his people. He had chosen freedom instead, no matter the cost. Coda had watched other bands fade away on the reservations, had seen pride hollowed out and hope drained from men forced to surrender everything that made them who they were. He chose another road, one of constant alertness, hard miles, and the quiet knowledge that any dawn could be his last. It was a brutal choice, but it was freedom, and freedom demanded a price worth paying. "We move when the sun kisses the western peaks," Coda said, his voice calm and steady. "We take only what keeps us alive through winter. We spill no blood unless it's forced upon us. The cattle are the goal, nothing more. Do you understand?" The Red Mesa riders answered in low agreement. They'd heard these words before every raid, and they knew he meant them. Coda was no butcher chasing revenge. He was a man who did what survival required. No more, no less. As the sun slid downward, staining the snow in gold and deep red, Coda felt a subtle tightening in the air. It was a feeling he trusted, a quiet warning carried by instinct, telling him this day would not end like the others. His hand drifted to the medicine pouch at his chest, fingers brushing worn leather. "Brother?" Ridge asked, catching the motion. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," Coda said, eyes still locked on the valley. "But after today, nothing will be the same." He had no idea how true that would be. Clara Whitmore had never cared much for Santa Fe's winter social season. The endless dances, the forced smiles, the way young women were displayed like livestock for inspection. This year, the whole spectacle felt unbearable. At 23, she was already brushing against the dangerous label of too old, a fact her father mentioned with growing irritation. The truth was simple. Clara had no desire to become any man's decoration, no matter how rich or powerful. She had turned down 5 proposals in 2 years, each refusal sharpening her father's temper. Eli Boone had clawed his way from nothing into one of the territory's wealthiest men through ruthless deals and sheer will. He expected his daughter to lock their status in place with a strategic marriage, to the silver-rich Mitchells or the banking Harringtons of San Francisco. Instead, Clara buried herself in books he called improper: philosophy, politics, even science. At dinners, she spoke her mind and unsettled his partners. She rode with the foreman, studied the herds, and asked questions that hinted she could run the ranch herself. "You're too headstrong," her father snapped that morning, his face darkening with rage. "You think you can run a ranch? Outsmart men who've lived this work their whole lives? You're a woman, Clara. Your duty is to marry well, keep a house, and bear heirs. That's what's expected." The argument burned until Clara could stand no more. She stormed out, ordered the stable hands to saddle Tempest, and rode hard toward the northern pastures. Still seething, her father allowed it, perhaps hoping the cold wind would break her stubborn streak. Now, as the winter sun dropped toward the western peaks, Clara found herself near the canyon lands, wrapped in a heavy wool coat lined with fox fur, unaware that her path was about to cross a fate far larger than either world she knew. Her blonde hair was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, the wind tugging at loose strands as she rode. Clara Whitmore sat astride her favorite mare, Tempest, a spirited gray given to her on her 16th birthday. Around her rode 4 of the Boone Ranch's most seasoned hands. Harlan Crow rode closest, grizzled, broad-shouldered, a former cavalry scout whose weathered face carried decades of hard country. Beside him was Caleb Freeman, once enslaved, now the finest horseman in the territory. Trailing them were the younger men, Tom Pike and Luke Barrett, both eager, both hungry to prove themselves. For the better part of an hour, Harlan had tried to turn her back. "Miss Clara," he said at last, uneasy, "light's dropping fast this close to the high country, and there's talk of Apache moving through these parts." He hesitated. "I don't mean to worry you, ma'am, but your father would skin me alive if anything happened to you." Clara knew he was right. Sense said she should turn Tempest toward home and reach the ranch before darkness closed in. Yet the land held her fast. Snow-draped peaks caught the dying light, glowing rose and gold. The silence, broken only by wind through pine and the rough call of a raven, felt honest in a way Santa Fe parlors never had. Out here she could breathe. Out here she was not a dutiful daughter or a prize to be claimed. She felt alive, frightened and exhilarated all at once. "Just a few more minutes," she said softly, blue eyes drinking it in. "It's beautiful up here, so peaceful." Soreno. The word peaceful barely left her mouth when the sound reached them. Distant thunder of hooves, men shouting, the sharp edge of chaos rising from the valley. "The herd!" Caleb Freeman yelled, hand flying to the rifle at his saddle. "Someone's scattering them," Harlan Crow said, drawing his own weapon, eyes narrowing. "Apache raiders, Red Mesa riders." "Miss Clara, you ride back, now," he ordered. "We'll handle this." Before she could answer, Tempest reared as gunfire cracked through the cold like splitting ice. The mare bolted, toward the noise instead of away. Clara fought the reins, heart slamming, while the men spurred after her, shouting for her to turn back. Wind, hooves, and rifle fire swallowed their voices. She should have been terrified. Every instinct should have sent her running. Instead, some reckless, untamed part of her surged forward. What unfolded below was nothing like the stories she'd heard. The Apache moved like living shadows, precise, fluid, turning chaos into something almost graceful. They drove the cattle toward the mountain passes with skill that made the ranch guards look like fumbling boys. Boone's hired men fired wildly, panic betraying them. And then, through blowing snow and drifting smoke, Clara saw him. He sat a paint horse marked black and white, stark against the snow. Still, commanding. Coda. Even at a distance, he carried authority as naturally as breath. The way he rode made horse and rider seem forged into a single force, the smallest motion of his hand guiding the Red Mesa riders with instant obedience. He did not look like a man moving through the land. He looked like part of it. Across the chaos, his gaze found hers. The world slowed. Sound dulled. Snow, smoke, and gunfire faded until there was only those dark eyes holding Clara's. She had never trusted the idea of instant recognition, the notion that two souls could know each other in a heartbeat. She'd read about it in novels and dismissed it as invention. Yet when his obsidian stare locked with hers across the white churn of battle, something shifted deep in her chest. It felt as if her heart had been waiting, quietly, patiently, for this exact moment. As if a hidden part of her finally recognized its match. The Apache leader's eyes widened a fraction, and even from afar she caught it. Surprise, recognition, a flash of something like wonder. Then his focus sharpened. He drove his heels in and surged toward her. Panic broke the spell like ice water through her veins. Clara spun Tempest hard and drove the mare into a desperate run, heart slamming so fiercely she thought it might tear free. Behind her came the thunder of hooves, fast, closing, his pursuit relentless. The snow betrayed her. Ice hid beneath its clean surface. Tempest's hooves skidded on a frozen creek masked by powder, and Clara went down hard. The impact stole her breath, stars bursting across her vision. Her rifle flew from its scabbard and landed just out of reach. She lunged for it, fingers numb and clumsy with fear. She was inches away when a shadow swallowed the snow. Coda dismounted with impossible grace. He struck like a coiled snake, kicking the rifle aside before she could touch it, then used his weight to pin her gently but unyieldingly, his hands locked around her shoulders, firm, controlled, never cruel. Clara fought him, gasping, her breath ragged from shock more than effort. She felt everything. The press of his body, the strength holding her still, the curtain of his long black hair falling forward to shut out the world. This close, she saw every line of his face. The hard jaw, the high cheekbones, eyes deep enough to lose a lifetime in. He's beautiful. The thought struck her, sudden and startling. Not handsome in the polished way of Santa Fe men, but beautiful like the land itself. Wild, fierce, unbroken. They stared at one another, breaths fogging the cold air between them. Snow drifted down, clinging to her pale hair and catching in his dark lashes, sealing a moment that felt impossibly private amid violence. The raid faded to a distant murmur, as though the world had narrowed to this single point. Coda looked down at the woman beneath him, and everything he knew shifted. She was beautiful, more than the sunrise over sacred peaks, more than anything he had imagined. Her eyes held the clear blue of a summer sky, wide with fear, edged by defiance, and threaded with something deeper that reached past thought or reason and struck him straight in the chest. Strands of pale hair slipped free beneath her hat, framing a face that seemed born of another world. Soft, sheltered, distant from the hard country that had shaped him. Yet it wasn't her beauty that stunned him. It was the fire in her gaze. The refusal to bow. The spirit that would not dim, even with fear tightening her breath. She met his stare without flinching. No tears, no pleading, no surrender of self, though she lay wholly at his mercy. In that instant, Coda knew with a clarity granted only once in a lifetime that his world had split and reformed. This woman, golden-haired, forbidden, meant to be his enemy, was somehow impossibly his future. The realization shook him harder than any battle. He felt her heart racing beneath his palms, saw the quick flutter at her throat, her lips parted as she fought for air. A dangerous thought crossed him. What her lips might taste like, what sound she might make if he released her at once, stepping back as if burned. The loss of contact cut deep, but he forced distance, forced memory, who he was, why he was here. Clara Whitmore scrambled upright, never taking her eyes from him. They stood there, locked in silence, the space between them charged with something unnamed and more lethal than lead or steel. Then she turned and ran. Coda let her go. Every instinct roared to chase, to claim what some ancient part of him already knew as his, but he did not move. He watched her flee across the snow, her figure shrinking toward the ranch buildings, pale hair streaming behind her like a banner. Ridge came up beside him, scarred face tight with concern. "Brother, are you hurt? Did she strike you?" "No," Coda said softly, eyes fixed on the horizon she'd vanished into. "But I won't be the same." "We should move," Ridge urged. "We have what we came for. White men are closing in." Coda nodded. He mounted and led the red mesa riders back into the mountains with 200 head of cattle. As they disappeared into the high country, a single truth beat through him like a drum. She would be his, not by force, not by capture, but by something far stronger, something that terrified him more than any enemy. She would be his because it was meant to be, because in that frozen moment, he had seen his entire life written in the blue depths of her eyes. The Apache did not believe in the white man's idea of fate. They believed in freedom, in choice, in the will to shape one's own road. Still, Coda could not deny what he had felt holding her in the snow, her heart hammering against his hand. He would wait, days, months, years, until she knew it too. Clara barely remembered the ride back to the ranch. Harlan Crow and the others found her at last, relief softening their fear when they saw she was unharmed. Nearly 200 head of cattle were gone, yet no lives had been lost. The raiders melted into the mountains like smoke, leaving tracks the falling snow would soon erase. When Clara reached the house, her father was waiting. clothes rumpled, face pale with fury. Eli Boone paced the parlor like a trapped beast, rage shaking the walls. His face flushed dark with fury as he paced the room, spitting words about savagery, lawlessness, and a useless territorial governor who refused to send more soldiers to deal with the Apache threat. "This is exactly why I forbade you from riding to the northern pastures," he roared, slamming his fist onto the mahogany desk hard enough to rattle the crystal decanters. "Those savages could have killed you, or worse. Do you have any idea what they do to white women they take?" Clara Whitmore sat near the fireplace, wrapped tightly in a blanket a servant had placed over her shoulders. She said nothing. She could still feel the weight of the Apache leader's hands on her, still see the intensity in his dark eyes as he had looked down at her in the snow. Her heart had not slowed since the moment he released her. What frightened her most was not that he had captured her, but that in that breathless instant before he let her go, some treacherous part of her had not wanted him to. "Clara, are you listening to me?" She looked up to find her father staring at her with sharp impatience, and something close to concern, if Eli Boone were capable of such a thing. "I'm sorry, Father. What did you say?" "I said I'm hiring more guns. Professional men from Texas. Men who know how to deal with Apache raiders and won't hesitate to do what's necessary." His eyes hardened. "And you will not ride north again. Is that clear?" She nodded automatically, but his words barely reached her. Her thoughts were far away, tangled in the memory of dark eyes, steady hands, and a connection that made no sense at all. That night, Clara lay awake in her four-poster bed beneath silk sheets and hand-stitched quilts, staring at the ornate plaster ceiling. Sleep would not come. She kept seeing his face, kept feeling that strange current that had passed between them. It was madness. He was Apache, her people's enemy, a raider who had stolen her father's cattle. By every rule she had been taught, she should fear him. She should be grateful he had spared her. She should never want to see him again. Instead, all she could think about was what might have happened if that moment had lasted just a little longer. 3 weeks passed, and Clara felt herself unraveling. Winter tightened its grip, bringing storms that made travel dangerous and trapped most people indoors. She had always loved winter, the hush of fresh snow, fires crackling in warm rooms, long hours lost in books. But this year she was restless, sharp-tongued with the servants, constantly arguing with her father, unable to focus on even her favorite novels. She told herself it was cabin fever. She refused to admit the truth, that she watched the horizon daily, searching for something she could not name, hoping for something she dared not acknowledge. Her father kept his promise. The iron spur guns arrived from Texas and Arizona, hard men with cold eyes and pistols slung low. They patrolled the ranch with ruthless discipline, set traps in the passes, and spoke casually about killing Apache, as if discussing pests. Their presence unsettled Clara deeply. She had been raised to believe the Apache were brutal and uncivilized, but she had looked into the eyes of their leader. What she had seen there was not savagery. It was intelligence, pride, honor, and something else. Something that had awakened a part of her she never knew existed. When the skies finally broke after a punishing storm, Clara Whitmore could no longer endure the walls closing in around her. She rose before dawn, pulled on her heaviest riding clothes, and slipped from the house before any servant could stop her. She saddled Tempest herself and rode into the pearl-gray morning, following a narrow trail that climbed toward the high country. She told herself she wanted only open space and cold air after weeks of confinement. She refused to admit she was searching for him. By the time the sun climbed higher, she reached a small clearing ringed by tall pines, their branches sagging under snow. The place lay untouched. No sign of man, only the delicate prints of deer and rabbits. Clara dismounted and walked toward the trees, drawing in the sharp, clean air. For the first time in weeks, something eased inside her chest. "You should not be here alone." She spun so fast she nearly slipped, heart leaping hard enough to steal her breath. He stood at the edge of the tree line, motionless as the pines themselves, like something drawn straight from her restless thoughts. He wore buckskin and fur against the cold, long black hair loose over his shoulders, dark and shining in the morning light. In the clear winter sun, he looked unreal, too wild, too striking to belong to her world. Clara's instinct screamed at her to run, to mount Tempest and flee back to the ranch. Yet her feet would not move, and her eyes stayed locked on his face. "I could say the same to you," she answered, startled by the steadiness of her voice despite her pounding heart. "This is Boone land." A flicker, almost a smile, softened the hard lines of his face. "This land was my people's long before any Boone set foot on it," Coda said. "We do not recognize fences or words written on paper." He stepped closer, so quietly she heard nothing at all. Clara's hand drifted toward the small pistol in her coat pocket, but she did not draw it. Some deeper instinct told her it would be useless. He could disarm her before she even raised it. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Coda stopped a few paces away, close enough for her to see the cold flush on his bronze skin, the gold flecks in his dark eyes she hadn't noticed before, the fine lines at their corners that hinted at laughter behind his severity. "If I wanted you dead, you would not have left that valley 3 weeks ago," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she remembered, rough in a way that sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "I did not come to harm you. Then why did you come?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning neither dared name. Coda did not look away, and Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the frost. "I have watched the horizon every day since we met," he said at last, voice low and intent. "Hoping to see you ride out, hoping for another chance to look upon your face." His gaze held hers. "When I saw you leave your ranch this morning, I followed." "I shouldn't have," he said quietly. "Everything I know says this is unwise, and still, I could not stop myself." Clara Whitmore's breath caught, stunned by the naked truth in his voice. No man had ever spoken to her like this, without polish, without armor. The men in Santa Fe hid behind careful manners and rehearsed praise, never offering anything real. "You've been watching me," she whispered. "Yes." No apology, no excuse, only truth, laid bare. "Why?" Coda stepped closer, near enough now that she caught the scent of pine smoke and leather, and something else beneath it, clean and untamed. "Because from the moment I looked into your eyes, you followed me," he said, each word measured, heavy with meaning. "I see your face when night comes and I close my eyes. I do not believe in the white man's God," he continued, voice low, "nor in a destiny written among the stars. But when I held you in the snow, I knew you were meant to walk into my life. Meeting you changed something in me that cannot be undone." Tears burned at the corners of Clara's eyes. She should have felt fear. She should have been angry at his certainty. Instead, something deep within her answered his words, her spirit turning toward his like a flower seeking light. "This is impossible," she said, her voice breaking. "You know it is. We can't. There's no way." "I know," Coda said gently. "My father would kill you if he knew you were this close," she rushed on. "His hired guns are waiting for any excuse to hunt your people." "I know. Our people have been at war for generations. There is blood and hatred older than either of us." "I know." Then why are we standing here? She faltered, talking as if any future, any kind of, could exist. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to step away. She didn't move. When his fingers brushed her cheek, the tenderness of the touch nearly broke her. His skin was rough, warm, marked by hard years, yet the care in his hand made her want to cry. Because some things are stronger than war, he said softly, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Stronger than hatred, stronger than every reason this should not be. I looked into your eyes and saw my future, he went on, and now I cannot unsee it. I cannot return to who I was before I knew you lived. Clara closed her eyes, leaning into his hand despite every rational warning screaming at her to flee. When she opened them, the look on his face made her chest ache. Longing, tenderness, and something close to pain. I don't even know your name, she whispered. Coda, he said. It means one who runs swiftly. He met her gaze. And you are Clara Whitmore. I heard your men call for you during the raid. Coda, she repeated, the sound unfamiliar and strangely beautiful. We shouldn't be here. Together. This is dangerous, for both of us, she said quietly. We shouldn't be here. I need to go back before anyone realizes I'm gone. Yes, Coda agreed. You should. Still, neither of them moved. They stood in the clearing as the sun climbed higher, winter light spilling through the pines and laying ribbons of gold and shadow across the snow. The world seemed to narrow, shrinking down to just the two of them, to a moment hovering beyond time and consequence. Will I see you again? Clara Whitmore asked. She hated the need in her voice, how much she wanted him to say yes. Coda's thumb traced her cheek one last time before he let his hand fall. The effort it took was written plainly in his eyes. Do you want to? He asked. I don't know what I want, Clara admitted, the truth breaking free. I only know I haven't stopped thinking about you since that day, that I've been searching for you without admitting it to myself. Standing here with you feels more real, more right than anything I've ever known. Her breath shook. And that terrifies me. Then we are the same, Coda said softly. The warmth and understanding in his voice tightened her chest. You have become the center of my world, and I do not know if that is a blessing or a curse. Perhaps it is both. Both, Clara whispered, managing a fragile smile. I think you're right. Coda smiled then, truly smiled. It softened the hard lines of his face, made him look younger and somehow even more striking. Yes, he said. I think it is both. They talked as though the day belonged to them alone. Clara learned that Coda had never wanted to be a warrior. As a boy, he had dreamed of becoming a healer, learning the plants and animals of the mountains from his grandmother, who carried the old medicine knowledge. But war had chosen him instead. His father had been killed by soldiers when Coda was 16, and leadership had fallen on his shoulders because there was no one else strong enough to carry it. Clara told him about her mother's death when she was 12, about growing up in a house full of men who wanted her quiet and ornamental. She spoke of the books she read in secret, the life she dreamed of beyond society's narrow limits, the constant sense of living in a cage, no matter how finely gilded. You are like a wild horse, Coda said, studying her with an intensity that left her feeling utterly seen. Beautiful, strong, and penned in a space far too small for your spirit. You were meant to run free. Clara laughed, though it came out broken, close to tears. That's exactly it, she said. A wild horse in a golden stable. Wild horses are meant to run, he replied gently, to feel wind in their manes and earth beneath their hooves, to choose their own path. And you? Clara asked, searching his face. Are you free? Coda's gaze drifted beyond the clearing. I am free in ways your people may never understand, he said. "But I am also bound by responsibility, by the lives that depend on my choices. True freedom." He paused. "I do not know if it exists for anyone." "We're all bound by something," Clara said. "Duty, love, honor, survival." When she finally mounted Tempest to return to the ranch, Coda reached up and caught her hand, his grip warm despite the cold. "Will you meet me here again?" he asked, hope and vulnerability clear in his eyes. By the next day, when the sun would stand at its highest point, Clara Whitmore knew she should refuse. She knew every moment spent with him was a quiet betrayal of her father, of her world, of everything she had been taught to accept without question. Yet when she looked into his eyes, those rules faded, drowned beneath something stronger than fear or duty. "Yes," she said at last, her voice barely more than breath. "I'll be here." His smile broke across his face like sunlight through storm clouds. He lifted her gloved hand and pressed it to his lips, a gesture so gentle and unexpected that tears stung her eyes. Then he let her go. Clara rode back to the ranch in a daze, her thoughts tumbling over one another. She was falling in love with a man she was supposed to hate. She was risking everything for stolen moments in hidden places, and she could not bring herself to regret any of it. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own road. And that road led straight to Coda. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara and Coda met in secret nearly every day, never twice in the same place. Sometimes they returned to the clearing where they had first spoken. Other times they met in a narrow canyon where a hidden hot spring steamed in defiance of winter's grip. Once, they sat beside a frozen waterfall, the ice catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. They talked about everything and nothing. Coda taught her words from his language, laughing at her clumsy attempts but never mocking her. She shared passages from her favorite books, watching his face as he listened with full attention, asking questions that showed he understood not only the words, but the meaning beneath them. They learned each other's lives with the hunger of souls, long starved for real understanding. Clara spoke of growing up surrounded by wealth, yet aching with loneliness, of the constant pressure to become something she was not, of dreams buried because she had been told they were impossible. Coda told her of boyhood days in the mountains, tracking deer beside his father, learning healing plants from his grandmother, and the moment everything changed, when he was forced to become a warrior instead of the healer he once dreamed of being. With every meeting, the pull between them grew sharper, alive in the air like lightning before a storm. It lingered in glances held too long, in accidental touches that sent heat racing through their blood, in silences so charged neither could look away. Yet Coda never pressed her, never demanded. He gave her only patience, respect, and a gentleness that drew her deeper with every hour they shared. One afternoon, as they sat beside a small fire Coda had built to fight the cold, Clara noticed pale scars crossing his hands. Old wounds, long healed. "How did you get these?" she asked, tracing one lightly with her fingertip, startled by how such a small touch set her heart racing. Coda glanced down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Many winters ago," he said, "when I was young and foolish, I fought a mountain lion stalking our camp, too close to the children. I survived," he added quietly. "Barely. These scars remind me that courage and stupidity are often the same thing. Only the outcome decides which name we use." Clara smiled despite herself. "You're not stupid," she said. "Brave, reckless maybe, but not stupid." "No?" He lifted an eyebrow, humor flickering in his dark eyes. "Then what would you call a man who risks everything? His safety, his people, his life, to meet a woman he can never truly have? A woman whose world and his were never meant to touch?" The words settled heavily between them, pulling both back to the truth they had been avoiding. Clara's smile slowly faded as the weight of reality crashed back over her like a cold wave. "Coda, what are we doing?" she asked softly, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Where can this possibly lead? We're living inside a dream, but dreams always end." He turned fully toward her, the firelight catching in his eyes, as his hands rose to cradle her face with a tenderness that stole her breath. "I don't know where this leads," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "I only know that when I am with you, I feel whole in a way I never have before. That you make me want to believe in a future where our people are not enemies, where love is strong enough to cross every divide, where we build something instead of being torn apart by forces we never chose." "But love isn't enough," Clara whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Not in this world. My father would never accept you. Your people would never accept me. The laws, the hatred, generations of blood between us." She shook her head. "How can love be stronger than all of that?" Coda brushed her tears away with infinite care, his touch reverent, as if she were something rare and fragile. "Then perhaps we must make our own world," he said quietly. "One where there is room for both of us, where old hatreds cannot reach." "How?" she asked. "Where would we even go?" "I don't have all the answers," he admitted, pain threading his words. "I was raised to lead, to solve what others could not. But this—" he exhaled. "This I cannot solve with strength alone." Then his gaze locked onto hers. "But I know this. I would rather die free with you than live without you. If you asked me to leave my people, to walk away from everything I have ever known, I would do it." "For you," he said softly, "I would go anywhere, become anyone." Clara's heart cracked open at his words, at the vulnerability, the truth in them. "I can't ask that of you," she whispered. "Your people need you. You're their leader. I won't be the reason you abandon them." "You do not have to ask," Coda replied. He rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. "I offer it freely. A man cannot lead with a heart torn in two. Without you, I would become hollow, broken, and a broken man is no good to anyone." She kissed him then, because she could no longer hold it back. It was her first kiss, and she poured everything into it: fear, longing, hope, heartbreak. It was tender and desperate all at once, filled with promise and pain. Coda answered her with a hunger that matched her own, pulling her close, erasing the space between them. He kissed her like a man who had found water after a lifetime of thirst, like she was the breath he needed to survive. When they finally parted, both of them breathless, Clara felt as if fire ran beneath her skin despite the winter cold. She had never known a kiss could do this, make her feel weightless and burning, undone and awakened. "Goodness gracious," she breathed, eyes wide, fingers pressed to her lips, as if she could trap the feeling there forever. Coda laughed then, a deep, warm sound filled with wonder and quiet triumph. "Is that a good thing?" "I don't know," Clara Whitmore admitted honestly, her heart still racing, her whole body trembling with the aftershock. "I've never felt anything like it before. It's intense, almost frightening in how strong it is." His expression softened, serious and gentle all at once. "But do you want more?" She looked into Coda's eyes and saw her own longing reflected there, saw how much restraint it cost him to let her decide the pace. "Yes," she whispered, the word rising from a part of herself she was only beginning to discover. "I want more. I want everything." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Clara surrendered completely. In his arms, the impossible felt possible. In his arms, She could believe that love might truly be enough. In his arms, she was, at last, free. But freedom like that could never last forever. Clara had known it from the beginning, even as she let herself believe they might somehow steal more time, live forever in those hidden moments. She thought she had been careful. She varied her rides, never stayed away too long, always returned with believable stories of exploration or quiet solitude. But she had underestimated two things: her father's web of informants and the sharp suspicions of the hired guns who prowled the ranch boundaries with predatory patience. One of them, a lean, hard-eyed man named Silas Knox, with the cold stare of a rattlesnake, followed her to one of her meetings with Coda. Hidden from view, he watched as they kissed, as they held each other with desperate tenderness, as they spoke words that would be called treason by both their worlds. Silas Knox reported directly to Eli Boone, delivering his account with the thinly veiled pleasure of a man who thrived on other people's ruin. Clara was in the stables, brushing Sky and thinking about Coda's promise to meet her again the next day, when her father burst in, Silas Knox and 3 other hired guns at his back. The fury on Eli Boone's face turned her blood to ice. "How could you?" he thundered, his voice echoing off the wooden beams, making the horses shift nervously in their stalls. "How could you betray your own people like this? Everything I've built, everything your mother and I sacrificed to give you this life." Her heart dropped, but she forced her voice to remain steady as she turned to face him. "I don't know what you mean, Father. Don't you dare lie to me." He seized her arm, his grip bruising. "Silas saw you, with that Apache savage. Saw you kissing him like some street woman in the alleys of Santa Fe." Clara tore her arm free, anger surging at last, years of control and silence boiling over. "He is not a savage," she snapped. "His name is Coda, and he is more honorable, more decent than any man you ever tried to force me to marry." Eli Boone's hand struck her face hard enough to whip her head aside, splitting her lip. She tasted blood, but she did not cry. She would not give him that satisfaction. "You will never see him again," Eli Boone said, his voice shaking with a rage that burned like fire. "You will remain in this house under guard until I arrange a marriage that salvages what's left of your reputation, if that's even possible now." Then he turned to Silas Knox, his eyes gleaming with cold intent. "As for your Apache lover," he said, each word sharp as a blade, "I want him dead." "I want his entire band wiped out," Eli Boone said coldly. $5,000 in cash to the man who brings me Coda's scalp as proof." "No." Clara Whitmore hurled herself toward her father, but the iron spur guns seized her arms, wrenching her back as she fought them with everything she had. "Please, Father, please don't do this," she sobbed. "I'll do whatever you want. I'll marry anyone you choose. Just don't hurt him." Eli Boone looked at her with a disgust so sharp it felt like a slap. "You're pathetic," he said, "degrading yourself for a savage. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become." He turned away and left her there, shaking and crying, while the hired men dragged her back into the house. They locked her in her room and left her alone. Clara threw herself against the door, screaming and pounding until her throat burned and her hands throbbed, but it changed nothing. The oak door didn't budge. The lock was new, heavy, unbreakable. No one was coming. She had to warn Coda. She had to tell him that there was a price on his head, that killers were already moving, that her father meant to destroy him and the Red Mesa riders. But when she rushed to the window, her heart sank. Iron bars had been fitted in place while she was in the stables. Guards stood watch in the hallway. Her father had planned everything. She paced the room like a trapped animal, her mind racing through one desperate plan after another, climbing the window despite the bars, overpowering armed guards with bare hands, setting her own room on fire as a distraction. Every idea collapsed under its own impossibility. The next day crawled past in torment. Coda would have been waiting for her. He would have wondered why she didn't come. Would he think she had chosen her world over him? Or worse, would he ride closer to the ranch looking for answers, straight into the trap her father had set? The thought of him being hunted, cornered, killed, made her physically ill. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She paced, prayed, and begged any power that might be listening to keep him alive. On the third night of her imprisonment, help came from the last person she expected. Long after the house had gone quiet, when even the guards were struggling to stay awake, Clara heard a soft tap against the window. She rushed to it, heart pounding, and found Caleb Freeman outside. The man from the stables, the one who had always treated her with quiet respect. He stood on a rope ladder in the darkness, his face tight with worry and resolve. "Miss Clara," he whispered, "I can't get you out. Too many guards and these bars won't give. But I can get a message to him, if you tell me where to find him." Relief hit her so hard her knees nearly buckled. With shaking hands, she tore a page from one of her books and wrote fast, her words blurring with tears. She told him everything: her father's fury, the bounty, the iron spur guns, the killers already searching. She begged Coda to run, to take his people and disappear deep into the mountains where Eli Boone's reach would fail. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing the note into Caleb Freeman's rough hands. "You're risking everything. If my father finds out—" Caleb gave a sad, knowing smile. "I know what it's like," he said quietly, his eyes full of understanding. "To love someone the world says you're not allowed to have, Miss Clara." "I had a wife once, before I was ever free," Caleb Freeman said quietly. "Her owner sold her south, and I never saw her again. If helping you keep your love alive brings even a little meaning to that loss, then it's worth the risk." True to his word, Caleb rode out before first light. Using careful tracking and the kind of questions that don't draw attention, he found Coda's camp. He delivered Clara Whitmore's note into Coda's hands, then turned back toward the ranch before anyone noticed he had been gone. Coda read her words once, then again. Each line drove the truth deeper into his chest. Clara was a prisoner in her own home. Eli Boone had placed a heavy price on Coda's head. The iron spur guns were already riding, paid to kill him and anyone who stood with him. The red mesa riders gathered close as he shared the message. Their faces hardened. "We must run," Ridge said at once, his scarred face set with grim resolve. "Take the band deeper into the mountains, where white men can't follow. The land itself will protect us. It's the only choice that keeps our people alive." Murmurs of agreement spread quickly. Routes were named, canyons and high passes discussed. Disappearing was something they understood better than anyone alive. Coda said nothing. He stared at Clara's handwriting, at the places where tears had smeared the ink, at her desperate plea for him to save himself. And with a clarity that left no room for doubt, he knew he could not do what logic demanded. "I'm going to get her," he said. His voice cut through the camp like a blade. Silence fell. The men looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Brother," Ridge said carefully, stepping closer, "that's madness. They'll expect you to try this. It will be a trap, and you'll be dead before you're within 100 yards of that ranch." "Then I'll walk into the trap and take her anyway," Coda replied, calm despite the fists clenched at his sides. "You'll die," Ridge said sharply, grabbing his shoulders. "For what? For a woman you can never have? What happens to our people when you're gone? To everyone who depends on you to keep them alive?" The question hung heavy. Duty pulled one way. His heart tore the other. Coda breathed slowly, feeling the weight of every life he carried. "I've given everything to our people," he said at last. my youth, my dreams, every part of myself. But Clara is my heart, and a man cannot live without his heart. If I leave her to suffer because of loving me, I become hollow, broken, and a broken man cannot lead anyone." He looked around the circle, at men who had followed him through fire and blood. "I will not order any of you to come. This is my choice, my risk. But if any of you believe in love, if you know what it means to find the other half of your soul, then help me bring her home." No one spoke. The silence stretched tight as a drawn bowstring, and Coda prepared himself for the truth that he might have to face this fate alone. Then Ridge stepped forward, a reluctant grin cutting across his scarred face. "You're a fool," he said flatly. "A complete, hard-headed fool. But you're my brother, and I won't let you die alone. I'm in." One by one, others followed. Not all. Some had wives, children, obligations they couldn't abandon for what looked like a suicide ride. But 8 men, Ridge among them, pledged themselves to Coda's cause, ready to stake everything on love. They planned the impossible. The rescue came 5 nights later, under a moonless sky so dark it could hide a bird's shadow. Coda and his men closed in on Eli Boone's ranch with the patience and silence that made the Red Mesa riders feared across the territory. They slipped like smoke between patrols, mapped the house by feel and memory, and searched for the weak seam in what should have been an unbreakable guard. Caleb Freeman had given them what they needed. Where Clara Whitmore was held, the guards' numbers, the rhythm of their rounds, the safest approach and the likeliest way out. Even with that knowledge, the odds were brutal. Coda had faced worse. He climbed to Clara's window alone, heart hammering with more than the effort. When he tapped, her face appeared in the dark. Even through glass and iron, relief lit her features, turning despair into sudden, radiant hope. She tried to speak. He raised a finger. Silence. Guards were close. "Step back," he breathed. He set his knife to the bars, worrying the old mortar loose, inch by careful inch. Years of weather had weakened it, but every scrape sounded thunderous in his head. Each passing second felt like a hand tightening around his throat. 15 minutes. 20. Sweat slicked his back despite the cold. His muscles screamed. Then the bars came free. He slipped inside and Clara crashed into him, shaking, tears soaking his buckskin. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered into his chest. "I thought my father would kill you, that I'd be trapped here forever, that we were just a dream I'd have to remember while living a nightmare. I told you I'd tear down worlds to keep you," Coda murmured into her hair, whole again for the first time since reading her letter. "Did you think I meant it as poetry?" She laughed through tears, pure joy breaking free. "You came. You really came." "Always," he said, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. "I will always come for you. Now, quiet and quick. Can you do that?" She nodded. Fear sharpened into resolve. Below, his men waited in the shadows, eyes sweeping the dark. When Clara's boots touched ground, Coda took her hand and they moved, swift and soundless, toward the trees. They were steps from the line where night would swallow them, when a shout ripped the darkness open behind them. "They're escaping! Sound the alarm!" The shout tore through the night like a blade. A split second later, gunfire cracked the darkness, sharp and deafening, and the ranch exploded into chaos. Lanterns flared to life in windows. Men poured out of bunkhouses, shouting orders. Horses screamed as they were yanked from sleep and thrown into saddles. Dogs barked wildly, their voices feeding the frenzy. What had been a careful, silent rescue shattered into a desperate fight for survival. "Go!" Coda shouted to the Red Mesa riders, his voice cutting through the noise. "Get to the horses! Get her out, now!" But Clara Whitmore refused to release his hand. Her fingers clenched around his with fierce determination, as if letting go might tear her apart. She ran beside him through the darkness, breath burning in her chest, fear pounding through her veins. Bullets whined past them like angry hornets. Shouts echoed behind them, growing closer with every second. Boots thundered. Orders were screamed. The entire ranch seemed to be chasing them. Coda swore under his breath and pulled her faster. His horse waited exactly where it should have been. In one smooth motion, he lifted Clara up and swung her in front of him, settling her against his chest before spurring the horse forward into a full gallop. The world became speed and sound. Hooves pounded the frozen earth. Wind tore at Clara's hair and stole the breath from her lungs. Behind them came the thunder of pursuit. Ranch hands riding hard, guns flashing, voices raw with fury. But this was Coda's land. He drove the horse into terrain the others would never dare follow. Narrow mountain passes barely wide enough for a single rider. Frozen streams whose slick surfaces swallowed tracks. Steep ravines where a single mistake meant death. He chose every turn with instinct born of a lifetime in these mountains. The pursuit followed for a time, stubborn and reckless. Then, one by one, the sounds faded. The ranch hands slowed, unwilling to gamble their lives in terrain that punished the careless and devoured the arrogant, especially in darkness. They rode without stopping. By the time the sun rose, spilling pale gold, and rose across the snow-covered peaks, they reached Coda's camp high in the mountains. Clara could barely hold herself upright. Her hands were raw from gripping the saddle. Her body ached from terror, cold, and exhaustion. But she was free, and she was with Coda. Nothing else mattered. Members of the band emerged from the shadows, faces lined with relief, but also caution. Clara felt their eyes on her, not hatred, not hostility, weariness. She was the daughter of their enemy, a woman from the people who hunted them. Her presence carried danger. Coda did not hesitate. He faced them with quiet authority, one arm wrapped firmly around Clara's shoulders, not just protective, but unmistakably claiming. "This is Clara," he said, his voice steady, carrying across the camp. "She is under my protection. She has left her world for me. She has risked everything for our love." His gaze swept over the warriors. "Anyone who wishes to challenge that, anyone who questions my decision may speak now." No one did. The silence stretched, heavy but thoughtful, not hostile. Then Ridge stepped forward. His scarred face softened, and he inclined his head slightly toward Clara. "You are welcome here," he said in careful English. "Any woman brave enough to risk everything for love deserves our respect and our protection. You are one of us now." Tears burned in Clara's eyes. She seemed to cry more easily these days, as if every wall she had built had finally collapsed. "Thank you," she whispered. Coda led her to his dwelling, a shelter built against the mountain stone. It was simple but solid, warm despite its roughness. He fed the fire until heat filled the space, then wrapped her in thick furs. Only then did he look at her closely. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands gentle as they moved over her arms and shoulders, searching for injuries. "Just bruises," she said softly. "Nothing serious, nothing that won't heal." Her lip was swollen where Eli Boone had struck her. Dark marks ringed her arms where the hired guns had held her. Coda's jaw tightened as he touched her split lip with infinite care, fury coiling beneath his calm. "They will pay," he said quietly, not as a threat, but as a promise. "I should kill him for laying a hand on you," Coda said quietly, his voice edged with a violence that frightened even himself. "For daring to strike you in anger." No. Clara caught his hand before he could pull away and pressed it to her cheek, grounding him. Her voice was firm, unwavering. Enough blood has already been spilled because of me. I won't have you become a killer for my sake. All I want, she continued softly, is to be here with you, to figure out how we build a life together. Coda exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his shoulders. He drew her close, and they sat before the fire, holding each other as if letting go might tear them apart, like two souls trying to fuse into one simply by refusing to release their grip. What happens now? Clara asked, her words muffled against his chest. I don't know, Coda admitted. His fingers moved through her hair with absent tenderness. Your father won't stop searching. He'll use every ounce of his wealth, his influence. He'll hire every gun in the territory if he has to. He hesitated before continuing. And my people, they accepted you tonight because they trust me, because I gave them no choice. But they are afraid, Clara. Afraid I'm placing love above their safety. Afraid your presence will draw your father's wrath down on all of us. Are you? She asked quietly. Putting love before their safety? Coda was silent for a long time, his chest rising and falling beneath her cheek. Finally he spoke. Maybe. But I also have to believe, that there's a way for us to survive together. A way for our peoples to find peace instead of endless war. His voice softened. Maybe we can be the beginning of that. Maybe our love can be the first step toward something different. Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe love could change the world, could bridge centuries of hatred. But she had seen the fire in Eli Boone's eyes. She had witnessed the casual cruelty of the iron spur guns. She knew the stories. Massacres, broken treaties, promises buried alongside the dead. Still, sitting in Coda's arms, watching the flames dance, feeling safer than she ever had in her father's grand house, she allowed herself to hope. If love couldn't change the whole world, perhaps it could carve out one small corner of it, just big enough for them to exist together. Winter tightened its grip on the mountains, but Clara found she no longer feared the cold. Life in the Apache camp was harder than anything she had known. There were no servants, no soft beds, no comforts. She learned to cook over open fires, to mend clothes with bone needles and sinew, to work until her hands were raw and aching. The Apache women watched her closely at first, their suspicion sharp and justified. She was the daughter of a man who had stolen their land, spilled their blood. She embodied every reason they had to hate. But Clara did not complain. She worked, she listened, she learned. And slowly, the distance softened. An older woman named Annika, her face etched by years of hardship but her eyes warm with wisdom, took Clara under her wing. She taught her the Apache language with patient repetition, showed her their customs, their ways of surviving this unforgiving land. She spoke of the old days, before fences, before soldiers, before the world changed. Coda watched Clara's transformation with a pride so deep it almost hurt. She had been like a wildflower forced into too small a pot, roots bound and strangled. Now, given space and freedom, she was finally blooming into who she was always meant to be. She laughed more now. She smiled more. The weight that had pressed on her since childhood, the rules, the expectations, the quiet suffocation of her former life, began to fall away. Yet the danger tied to Eli Boone never left them. It hung over the camp like a dark storm line on the horizon. Eli Boone had doubled the bounty on Coda's head, pushing it to a sum unheard of in the territory. He offered additional reward for any word of Clara Whitmore's location. Bounty hunters and hired guns spread through the mountains with ruthless purpose, making every hunt, every movement of the Red Mesa riders more dangerous than the last. One night, As Clara lay wrapped in Coda's arms inside their shelter, listening to the wind scrape against the stone, she finally spoke the question that had been gnawing at her. "Will we ever stop running?" she asked softly. "Will there be a day when we're not waiting for my father's men to find us?" Coda ran his fingers through her hair, slow and thoughtful. "Not while we stay here," he said truthfully. "Your father's reach is too long. His hunger for control is too strong. Sooner or later, he will find us." "And when he does?" Clara whispered. Coda didn't hesitate. "We leave." She lifted herself onto one elbow, searching his face in the firelight. "Your people need you. You're their leader." "I've spoken with the elders of Red Mesa," Coda said. "Some will come north with us. Those who are tired of war, who want peace more than vengeance. Others will stay. Ridge has agreed to lead them. He is wise. He will keep them safe." Clara's voice trembled. "You would give all of this up for me?" Coda cupped her face, his eyes fierce with love and certainty. "You are not taking my life from me. You are giving me a new one. With you, I can imagine a future without blood and fear. You are not my burden. You are my salvation." Tears spilled freely down Clara's cheeks. She answered him the only way she could, by kissing him, pouring gratitude, devotion, and love into that single act. That night, they came together for the first time, not in haste or fear, but with tenderness and trust. In Coda's arms, Clara felt whole, as if a missing part of her had finally been returned. Later, beneath the firs, with the fire burning low, Coda whispered a promise. "When we reach the northern lands, I'll build you a home. Not grand like your father's house, but strong, safe. Ours. We'll fill it with laughter, with children, with a life that belongs to no one but us." Clara smiled against his chest. "Children?" "Yes," Coda said, smiling in the darkness. "Many, with your golden hair and blue eyes, free, belonging to both our worlds." "Or with your dark eyes and that fierce fire in your spirit," Clara Whitmore said softly, her fingers tracing slow patterns across Coda's chest. "Both," Coda answered without hesitation. "We will have both. Our children will stand between two worlds. They will be living proof that love can shape something new from what once seemed forever broken." They left 2 weeks later, as soon as the weather allowed safe passage. Coda, Clara, and 23 others who chose to follow them began the long journey north, toward land that promised distance from war and the chance to begin again. They moved carefully, avoiding towns and soldiers, traveling through country that grew wilder and more breathtaking with every mile. The journey stretched nearly 4 months, carrying them from the first stirrings of spring into the warmth of early summer. They endured sickness, injuries, swollen rivers that nearly claimed lives, and tense encounters with hostile bands who had no love for strangers crossing their territory. Yet there were moments of rare beauty that seemed to repay every hardship. Valleys awash in wildflowers, peaks that pierced the sky, forests so deep and green they felt like sacred halls. During those months, Clara learned more than she ever had in the parlors and classrooms of Santa Fe. She learned how to read the land, how to find water where none seemed visible, how to recognize plants that could heal or sustain. She learned the rhythm of traveling as a people, the quiet strength of shared hardship, the way community could forge bonds stronger than blood. And through it all, Coda was beside her, guiding, guarding, loving her with a steadiness that never faltered, no matter how harsh the road became. They reached their destination in late summer, a hidden northern valley where mountains stood like ancient sentinels and clear streams cut through the land, cold and pure. It was distant enough to offer peace, fertile enough to support hunting, and small fields. The nearest white settlement lay 3 days away. Too far for trouble to wander in easily, close enough for trade when needed. It was everything they had hoped for. It was home. They built their dwelling together, log by log, stone by stone. It was simple, strong, warmed by a solid hearth, with windows that opened to the wide valley below. That first autumn, Clara planted a garden, coaxing life from stubborn soil with patience and care. Coda hunted and trapped, trading pelts with the occasional traveler for supplies they could not make themselves. When the first snow fell, they were married in the Apache way, beneath the stars, with friends gathered as witnesses. Clara wore a dress Annika had helped her create, adorned with beadwork that had taken months to complete. Coda wore his finest buckskins, his hair braided with beads and eagle feathers. They spoke their vows quietly, promising to walk together through whatever the future demanded, to protect and honor one another for all their days. Clara felt joy so deep it seemed to rise from her very bones. This was not the wedding her father had planned. No chandeliers, no crowds, no empty spectacle. This was something far rarer, a joining of souls, witnessed by those who had become her true family, blessed by mountains, stars, and the love that had carried them so far. Their first year was not easy. Isolation weighed on them at times. The work never ended. Winters were cruel and unyielding. Clara occasionally missed the comforts she had left behind. Soft beds, hot baths, shelves of books. But every night she fell asleep in Coda's arms. And every morning, she woke to his smile. That was worth more than all the luxury she had ever known. In the spring of their second year in the valley, Clara Whitmore realized she was carrying a child. The knowledge filled Coda with a joy so sudden and overwhelming it left him speechless. He grew even more protective than before, urging her to rest, bringing her special foods he believed would strengthen the baby, speaking softly to her growing belly, as if the child could already hear his vows of love and guardianship. "You're going to be an incredible father," Clara told him one evening as they sat together, watching the sunset wash the sky in orange, violet, and gold. "I hope so," Coda said, his hand resting over her belly, feeling the gentle movement beneath his palm. "I want to give our children everything: love, safety, and the freedom to choose who they become. I want them to know both their heritages and to never feel forced to choose between them." "They will," Clara said, covering his hand with hers, "because they'll have you as their father, and a mother who will fight anyone who dares say they don't belong." Their daughter was born in early spring, during a soft snowfall that reminded Clara of the day she and Coda first met. The labor was long and punishing, guided by Annika and 2 other women skilled in the old ways. But when Clara finally held her child, the pain faded into nothing. In its place rose a love so fierce it frightened her. The baby carried Coda's dark eyes and Clara's golden hair, a perfect blending of 2 worlds, just as they had dreamed. They named her Sky, meaning eternal blossom in Coda's language. When Coda held his daughter for the first time, tears streamed freely down his face, tears of wonder, gratitude, and awe that something so pure could exist in a world that had once seemed ruled by cruelty. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's ours," Clara replied, smiling through her own tears. "The first of many, if you meant what you said." "I meant every word," Coda promised, kissing Clara's forehead, then their daughter's tiny head. "Our home will overflow with children, laughter, and love." 2 years later, they welcomed a son, strong-willed and fierce like his father, with a laugh bright enough to chase shadows away. They named him Rowan, meaning sparrowhawk, and he lived up to the name with boundless energy and fearless curiosity. Their home filled with children's voices, with warmth and belonging, with the kind of love that reshapes everything it touches. Coda taught his children to honor the land and respect both their Apache heritage and their mother's English roots. Clara taught them to read and write, sharing the few treasured books she had carried from her old life, opening doors to imagination and knowledge. The small settlement they built grew slowly. Apache families escaping reservation life arrived. Former slaves seeking freedom followed. White settlers who had never fit into rigid society found refuge there. What bound them together was a shared longing for peace, dignity, and a place where no one had to apologize for who they were. Ridge visited from time to time, bringing news of those who had remained in the South. They were surviving, adapting, holding on to their way of life as the world changed around them. Each time he left, his smile was genuine. Happy to see his brother so grounded, so whole. On their 10th anniversary, Clara rested her head on Coda's shoulder as they watched Sky and Rowan run through the meadow with their younger siblings. 3 more now, 2 daughters, and another son. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked softly. "Leaving leadership behind? Leaving your people in the South?" The question lingered in the open air, heavy with memory and meaning. Coda was silent for a long moment, his gaze following their children as they raced through the tall grass, their laughter riding the warm summer wind. "I didn't lose a life," he said at last, his arm drawing Clara closer. "I exchanged one for another. I left war to find peace, solitude to find love, simple survival to learn how to truly live. How could I ever regret that?" "But you were meant to be a great leader," Clara said softly. "You were born for it." "Was. I am leading," Coda replied, nodding toward their children and the small community that had grown around them. "I'm leading them into a future where Apache and White can live within one family, within one heart. A future where love outweighs hatred, where belonging matters more than blood. That kind of leadership is greater than anything I could have achieved through war." Clara kissed him, tasting the salt of tears they both tried not to shed. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Coda answered, his hand cradling her face with the same reverence he had shown the first time he touched her in that snowbound clearing years ago. "What we began will live on, in our children and in theirs, and in every generation that follows. We started something here, Clara, something that won't end. Liksom." As the sun sank behind the valley, flooding the sky with crimson and gold, their children ran toward them, breathless and shouting about birds they had chased, flowers they had gathered, adventures born entirely of imagination. Coda scooped Sky into the air, her laughter ringing out, while Clara pulled Rowan close as the younger children tumbled around them like restless pups. They were a family, Apache and English, warrior and rancher's daughter. 2 people who should never have crossed paths, yet had found in one another everything they had lacked. In the years that followed, 3 more children were born. 2 daughters and another son, each different, each cherished beyond measure. Their home overflowed with sound and life and love. Clara taught them to read, to treasure books, to think and question the world. Coda taught them how to survive the wild, how to honor the land, how to be both strong and gentle. They grew fluent in both English and Apache, carrying both heritages without apology, belonging fully to neither world and completely to both. They were living proof that divisions could be crossed, that something beautiful could grow from what once seemed forever broken. When Sky turned 16, a young man from a trapper family 3 valleys away fell deeply in love with her. Watching them together, Coda saw echoes of himself and Clara, the same impossible pull, the same recognition of kindred souls. "She reminds me of you," he murmured. She has your certainty, Clara replied, her fingers finding his as naturally as breath. When she knows what she wants, she doesn't turn away. When the young man asked for Sky's hand, Coda gave his blessing, seeing in the boy's eyes the same devotion he had once carried for Clara. Their wedding became a celebration unlike any other. Apache families, former slaves, white settlers, trappers, and neighbors from distant valleys gathered together. Cultures blended, worlds overlapped. It was the very union their own love had begun decades earlier. As Coda watched his daughter marry, her face shining with the same joy Clara had worn on their wedding day, he felt Clara's hand slip into his. "We did it," she whispered. "We proved love can cross any divide." "We proved more than that," Coda said, never looking away from Sky. "We proved that two people willing to risk everything for each other can change the world, one family at a time, one generation at a time." And they had. Their children and grandchildren carried that legacy across the territories, a love that refused to bow to hatred, to prejudice, or to the cruel lines that once kept people apart. They became teachers and healers, leaders and peacemakers, men and women who understood that the world was richer because of its differences, that real strength was born from unity, not division, and that love was always worth defending. Coda and Clara grew old together in the home they had built with their own hands. Their hair turned silver, their steps slowed, but their bond never weakened. If anything, it deepened with each passing year, anchored in shared hardship, shared joy, the family they had raised, the community they had shaped, and the future they had made possible. On a quiet spring morning, when Clara was 71 and Coda 76, they sat side by side on the porch of their house, expanded many times to hold generations, watching their great-grandchildren run through the meadow where their own children had once played. "I've had a good life," Clara said softly, her hand resting in Coda's, their fingers intertwined as they had been for more than half a century. "The best life," Coda agreed, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture as natural to him as breathing. "Far better than anything I imagined back when I was only a warrior trying to keep his people alive." "I love you," Clara said, the words carrying the same weight and truth they had held the first time she spoke them in the snow so many years ago. "And I love you," Coda replied, lifting her hand to his lips in the familiar way he always had. Always. And forever. They sat in peaceful silence as the sun climbed higher, surrounded by life. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the wider community that had grown from their shared vision. Around them lived the legacy they had built together, a legacy where love had outlasted hatred, a legacy where hope had defeated despair, a legacy that proved the heart often knows its home from the very first moment. For Coda and Clara, that home had been found in the snow when their eyes first met across a line of fear and violence, and their souls recognized one another without words. One glance had changed the course of their lives, setting into motion a story that would echo through generations. They had begun as enemies and become soulmates. They had risked everything and gained more than they ever believed possible. They proved that true love, fierce, steadfast, unyielding, could tear down old worlds shaped by hatred and build something far better in their place. And long after they were gone, that truth remained. Here is what matters most. Beginning again is not defeat. It is the bravest act a person can choose. Clara didn't merely endure life among the Red Mesa Riders. She uncovered pieces of herself that Eli Boone's grand house had buried for years. Strength she never knew she carried, joy she had never been permitted to feel, and a fierce, untamed spark in her spirit that had waited quietly, like stone beneath soil, for its moment to rise. That same untamed spark lives in you, I don't care what the mirror says about your age or what the world claims about your limits. There is something wild in your soul that refuses to be reduced by time, loss, or disappointment. Maybe it's been silent for so long you forgot it existed. Maybe life taught you to shrink, to be agreeable, to apologize for wanting more, for feeling deeply, for being too much, or never enough. But it's still there, waiting. And tonight, as you lie down, I want you to make peace with this truth. You do not need all the answers. Clara and Coda had no map when they turned north into the unknown. They had love, yes, but they also carried fear, doubt, and nights when they wondered if they had chosen wrong. They built their life the only way real lives are built, one small decision at a time. One log placed into the walls of their home, one seed pressed into stubborn ground, one kind word offered to someone who began as a stranger, one morning of waking up and choosing, again, to keep going. That is all any of us can do. That is all anyone has ever done. You've lived long enough to know life doesn't hand us perfect endings in a single, shining moment. Lasting love, real love, is formed in thousands of ordinary choices. Choosing each other, choosing hope, choosing to believe tomorrow might be softer than today. And you've been doing that all along. Every morning you opened your eyes despite the ache. Every kindness you gave while your own heart was cracked. Every smile you found when surrender would have been easier. Every quiet prayer or fragile hope whispered into the dark, even when you weren't sure anyone was listening. That is your love story. Not the one you imagined when you were young, when the future felt endless. But a true one, an honest one. A story of a soul that refused to let bitterness take root. That chose gentleness in a hard world. That kept believing beauty existed, even when it felt impossibly far away. Coda once told Clara their love would live on through their children and grandchildren. And it did, through generations who carried forward the truth that love is stronger than hate, and connection stronger than division. But your love lives on, too. It lives in every person you touched with compassion. In every moment of grace, you offered a world that didn't always deserve it. In the quiet way you showed others how to endure, how to hope, how to stand back up when everything said to stay down. You are someone's Coda, someone's Clara, the person who showed them that impossible things can happen, that hearts can mend, that it is never too late to choose love over fear. So tonight, let go of perfection. Let go of regret. Let go of the harsh voice that says you should have been more, done more, reached further. You are exactly who you were meant to be. Scarred, yes, but still standing, still loving, still brave enough to begin again. Marked by storms, yes, without question, but also shaped into something rare, something only time and endurance can create. Beautiful in your resilience, beautiful in your gentleness, beautiful in the way you refused to let hardship turn you hard. Close your eyes now. Let your body ease into stillness. Let tomorrow loosen its grip on your thoughts. You are safe. You are valued. You are enough exactly as you are. And when morning arrives, and it will, you will rise again. Not because you are forced to, not because anyone expects it, but because that is what warriors do. That is what survivors do. That is what souls filled with quiet, stubborn, magnificent love have always done. Rest deeply tonight. Let your dreams be kind. Tomorrow can wait. This moment is for peace. Somewhere between silence and sleep, remember this. Love does not fade with age or hardship. It deepens, it settles into the bones. It becomes the strength that carries us forward when nothing else can. And when dawn touches the land again, you will meet it, not unchanged, not unscarred, but whole. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.